Good evening, everyone. Let me welcome all of you to another session of a discussion series called Kapitalks that is being organized by monthly critical journal Kapitálu. Before we start, let me first thank you for coming. We appreciate it a lot. Then I would like also to thank Slovak Arts Council, Fond na podporu umenia, for supporting this whole series of discussions. Of course, Goethe Institute, we are very happy that you welcomed us here. And of course, I'm very honored to have my guests here. So I would like to thank you for coming and introduce you very quickly to the audience. With me here is Dagmar Schultz, director of the movie about Audre Lorde that you just saw. Hello, Dagmar.
Hi.
And with her is Ikou Hügel-Marshallovou, writer, activist, academician, and many other things. Also co-creator of the movie. So welcome, Ikou. A short introduction, maybe just a few sentences about your work, so we can then talk about it more. Dagmar here, she has studied both in Germany, in Berlin, and in the United States, and Puerto Rico, right? In the United States, she has studied in Mississippi, Chicago, and I read that you did your dissertation at the University of Wisconsin, and it was on workers' education. That's very interesting. And then you have been a professor in Berlin, where you were teaching women's studies, and you were a professor of social work. Then in 1974, you co-founded a Women's Health Center. We'll talk about that. That's an interesting institution. And also you co-founded Orlando Women Press, that's a publishing house. Right? And besides directing this movie, you also co-produced or produced the movie about May Aim, right? Yeah. Co-produced, right? Yeah. May Aim is the young poet that you saw in the movie. Let me start with questions that are loosely connected also to work of Audre Lorde. We are organizing this event because Kapitálu, that's the magazine I told you about, just had a whole issue about Audre Lorde and her life and her work. And Audre was known for many things. Some of them were her activist work, her being a poet and a feminist. So let me start asking about these roles, these identities that you share, many of them. Let's start with the activist one.
Do you want to introduce Ikou first?
Yeah, I will introduce Ikou when I'll ask her the question, don't worry. So let's start with the activist part of your life. You were in the United States in the 60s at the height of the civil rights movement. What is your experience of that era? Did you partake in the movement, in any activities?
Yeah, I was first at the university and was participating in student activities, but then I went to Mississippi to teach at a black school in Holly Springs, and this was in 1965, and there was a time when voter registration was going on and all kinds of development of projects in the black communities. And so I was involved in that. And then in 1966, I went to Puerto Rico and I worked there in family planning. And it was called The War on Poverty, was projects in different areas. And yeah, I mean, there's some things to say about that. Family planning was then a very questionable activity, because the first women to die of the pill, experiments with the pill, were Puerto Rican women, and we were not using that method in the program. But anyway, I was involved in that activity, and also an anti-war activity, because at the time the war against Vietnam started, and we had an organization there against the war. So just very short.
And then how did it change when you came back to Germany? Did any of this activist life continue there in a maybe different form?
Yeah. When I came back to Germany, I was first got involved with the women's movement there, and we started a women's health project, which kind of related to my work in Puerto Rico, and we worked with women's self-help, self-examination. I don't know if that means anything to anybody, but the women in the United States had started self-examination, which means that women can examine themselves with a speculum, a flashlight, and see their body in a way which usually just doctors see, you know, when you go to a gynecologist. So this was a very revolutionary thing to do. And from that, we also developed different methods of alternative treatment, and published a book after a year of our activities, and very much spread very fast, you know, across the country. Many groups started, and in a few years there were 20 feminist women's health centers, and some of them still exist today, and new ones also developed over time. So that was an important activity. And at the same time, we also started the publishing house, which was first called Self-Publishing House, and then eventually Orlando, Women's Publishing House, where we published the work, some of the works of Audre Lorde, and a lot of works by women of color and by white women.
Let me then also introduce Ikou Hügel-Marshallovou, because I will have similar questions for you. Ika is also an academician. She has been a professor of gender studies, diversity studies, and also has done some psychological counseling at the University in Berlin. Some of your activist work includes co-founding Women in Movement. We will talk about it. A self-defense group, because you yourself you have a black belt in Taekwondo, right? Okay. And besides this work, you are also a writer. If you are interested, Ika's book is here. You can buy it, and it is called, the English translation is called "Invisible Woman Growing Up Black in Germany." Originally published in 1988, and the English translation is from 2001. So let's get back to the activist part of your life. I find it very interesting that you co-founded this group for self-defense of black women, immigrant women, Jews, Muslims, and so on. Can you tell me more about the movement?
Yeah. Is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm speaking in German, so. Geht hier von Frauenbewegung, ne?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ika will speak in German, and you will translate, and Dagmar will translate it back. Thanks.
Okay. Ich war damals noch relativ jung, als Sally Graf, sie ist weiße Amerikanerin, nach Frankfurt kam und mit mir gemeinsam den Verein Frauen in Bewegung gegründet hat.
I was pretty young at that time when Sunny Graf, a US-American woman, came to Frankfurt, and we created together the association or the project Women in Movement.
Der Verein besteht jetzt schon ungefähr über 30 Jahre. Ich gehörte zu den ersten, die dort ihren Schwarzgürtel gemacht hat, den wir allerdings in den USA gemacht haben.
The association has existed now for over 30 years, and I belong to the first ones who made their black belt. The exam was taken in the US.
Für mich ging es natürlich nicht nur darum, diesen Budo-Sport auszuüben, also die Techniken von Taekwondo zu beherrschen.
For me, it was not just a matter of being able to practice the sport, these Budo techniques.
Ich habe auch gelernt, mich ganz anders durchzusetzen, während ich früher sehr scheu war oder auf bestimmten Rassismus gar nicht effektiv reagieren konnte, habe ich das zumindest dort gelernt.
But I learned to assert myself because of the sport, while before I could not really react to racist occurrences. I was much more able to do that afterwards.
Wir mussten, bevor wir unseren schwarzen Gürtel gemacht haben, auch einen Aufsatz schreiben, und es war mir ein Vergnügen zu schreiben, dass der weiße Gürtel der niedrigste ist und der schwarze der höchste.
Before we took our exam, we had to write an essay, and I did enjoy to state in that essay that the white belt is the lowest belt and the black belt the highest one.
Heute ist der Verein natürlich sehr gewachsen. Mittlerweile wird eben auch Selbstverteidigung und Taekwondo unterrichtet, sowohl für Kinder, für Jugendliche. Und mittlerweile wird auch Selbstverteidigung in der Moschee unterrichtet. Also der Verein ist mittlerweile sehr multikulti.
So by now the association or the project has grown a lot, and they are teaching children and then also teaching in mosques and Muslim women and also handicapped women and blind women. Sunny Graf, I'm just adding one sentence, Sunny Graf has a lot of awards in many martial arts, and it's the first one who's doing that kind of teaching. Okay.
Okay, let's get to the second Audre's identity, and that is a writer. You both have a lot to do with writing and publishing. So maybe first, Dagmar, what does it mean for you to start a publishing house, and what kind of work do you prefer to publish, and so on? And then please, Ika, tell us something more about your novel or autobiographical novel. What was your motivation? How was it received in Germany?
You want first?
No, well, we started the publishing house in a way that was very kind of alternative. It wasn't really a publishing house in the beginning, but each of us had an idea for a book and then was responsible for the individual book. Like, for instance, this book on self-help I mentioned, there was a group of us, and it was so successful. And then we eventually published a book on sexual violence with children and sexual abuse, and that became a major issue because it hadn't been talked about in Germany at all. So Der Stern, this magazine you may have heard of, made 2 double issues about it, and then we had to create a real publishing house. We had to be registered, and we couldn't just do it on an individual basis. So, and then, after I came back from the United States, for me it was very, very kind of upsetting that the women's movement was basically a purely white movement. So one thing in the publishing house was that we decided we were going to publish women of color to also bring that literature to Germany and into the women's movement and as in discussion. And the next step was that we said, well, a white team up to then, we are not going to publish women of color and continue being a white team. So we were looking out, we hired and involved women of color in the team at the publishing house. And Ika also joined us then, was doing the publicity manager. Yeah, that's kind of the activity of the publishing house, which unfortunately this year folded. And the books are still available, but it's not the same anymore. The name is continued by a person because it was not legally protected, but it's not the same anymore. When you look up Orlando, it's kind of a different publishing house.
Ja, also ich will anfangen, ich habe mich am Anfang natürlich nie als Schriftstellerin gesehen.
I never saw myself as an author.
Das heißt nicht, dass ich nicht schreiben konnte.
It doesn't mean that I can't write.
Und es war eigentlich Audre, die sagte, ich müsste unbedingt meine Geschichte aufschreiben.
And it was Audre who said to me, I really should write, document my story, her story.
Ich gehöre ja zu der bisschen älteren Generation von Afrodeutschen.
I belong to the older generation of Afro-Germans.
Und da war es mir wichtig, einfach das Buch zu schreiben und auch ein Stück Geschichte zu schreiben.
And so it was important for me to write the book and in that way also document a piece of history.
Und es ist für mich ein positives Buch.
For me it's a positive book.
Das heißt, vor mir, die wesentlich jünger waren, muss ich leider sagen, haben sich einige Afrodeutsche auch das Leben genommen, aufgrund von Rassismus zum größten Teil.
Like there are several black Germans who took their life basically on account of racism, who were persons who were younger than me.
Und mein Buch sollte eigentlich Mut machen und auch zeigen, dass es trotz Schwierigkeiten durch Rassismus auch immer einen Weg hinaus gibt.
But my book was supposed to encourage persons and to show that there's, despite racism, that there is a way out.
Und mit der Hoffnung, was dann auch passiert ist, dass mein Buch auch ins Englische übersetzt wird.
And in the hope that what also happened, my book would be translated into English.
Sodass auch meine Familie in Chicago es auch lesen kann.
So that my family in Chicago could also read it.
Did they read it, the book, your family?
Yes, but my father couldn't, also schon Englisch ein bisschen. Mein Vater konnte es nicht mehr lesen, er ist gestorben.
My father couldn't read it anymore, he died.
But
it was published.
But I have three brothers and two sisters in Chicago. They are still alive. I'm the oldest.
And actually, I'm going to add something. There is a YouTube playlist, Audre Lorde in Berlin YouTube playlist, and that also includes a number of interviews with people from different places about the film. And one of Ika's brothers and brother-in-law are talking about Audre and the film, and it's really interesting because these are two older men who had never been in contact with Audre and didn't know her work. And it's just really beautiful the way they talk about the film and what it means to them to find out about people in Germany, black people in Germany, and how they relate to that and compare it to their own situation.
You've just mentioned that your book helped some people because many black people in Germany might suffer from psychological problems caused by racism. And I must say we did an interview with both of you for this issue of Kapitálu, where you mentioned this problem. Also the problem that sometimes leads to suicides, as it was the case with the poet. Why is then important for you to tackle the health problems as a part of the activism, either in your case in these health centers, or how is it important for Afro-American or German American, Afro-Germans in Germany.
Mit dem Psychoproblem umzugehen.
Naja, eigentlich ist es immer noch ein Problem für sowohl auch Schwarze, die in Deutschland leben, als auch für afrodeutsche Therapeuten zu finden.
Well, it's still a problem for blacks in Germany and for Afro-Germans to find black therapists.
Ich persönlich bin nicht der Meinung, dass Schwarze auch bei schwarzen Therapeuten sein müssen, aber wenn es Weiße sind, müssen sich zumindest mit Rassismus auseinandergesetzt haben.
I personally am not of the opinion that the therapist has to be a black person, but if it's a white person, that person has to have dealt with, you know, being conscious of racism and the effects of racism.
Und ich weiß eben von vielen anderen Afrodeutschen, dass es, auch wenn sie sonstige Probleme haben, also gesundheitliche Probleme, es oft immer noch eine Überwindung ist, sich einer weißen Ärztin anzuvertrauen.
And I know of many black Germans that if they have a health problem, that it's still for them sometimes difficult to try to trust a white doctor. Now my question to Ikou was that I thought that what you also meant, not just in terms of therapists, but also within the community. And you know, how do people within the community deal with issues of, you know, where people get so much under pressure that they have psychological problems and health problems because of the stress of daily life. And well,
naja, dass es schwierig ist, sieht man einfach daran, dass sich einige umgebracht haben, ganz viele Psychiatrieerfahrungen machen, das heißt in der Psychiatrie sind, raus, auch immer wieder rein und raus.
Well, the difficulties are shown that there have been suicides and that a number of people are in psychiatric care and in hospitals in and out.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the fact that Ikou does not respond in the way which maybe we expect, it's that in the community, it's, as far as I can tell, that people haven't really found ways to support each other, and, you know, really strongly, you know, but there are attempts, you know, in terms of just because of what happened to persons, to just be more aware, you know, to be more aware of signs. When does a person show signs that stress is so intensive that the person needs some kind of help or support from outside? So I think that's an issue, definitely, no? Which is also in discussion, you know?
When we did the interview for the magazine, you mentioned some of Audre's lectures that dealt with her view of Europe and the view of people of color of Europe. There is a short excerpt that Ikou wanted to read tonight. If you still want to read it, yes. So let's do it. It is a short excerpt from a lecture, right?
Yeah. Maybe I give the context.
Yeah, give the context. Yeah.
There was a conference in 1988 in Berlin, pretty big conference for European authors, European writers, and the title was "The Dream of Europe," and it was the session which Audre Lorde was asked to participate in was moderated by Cohn-Bendit, who, you know, a green left activist politician, and there were at least eight authors, and Audre was told that there was no need to prepare a paper. You know, there would just be a general discussion. So when she got there, all the other authors had long papers, you know, which made her already, you know, feel pretty, you know, she was kind of pissed off. And she had her strong statement anyway, which you will hear, part of it you will hear now. And nobody reacted to her statement. So she finally got up in protest and left the podium. And, you know, she just felt the question of a dream of Europe was not addressed, you know. So.
Könnt ihr mich verstehen? Auch ohne? Da musst du es halten, ich kann nicht lesen. Okay. So? Is this okay? Okay. For most of my life, I did not dream of Europe at all except as nightmare. Some hear that Europe civilized the world. To me and to a third of the world population, people of color, it is more like Europe enslaved the world. 17th, 18th and 19th century, Europe came to the shore of Africa and bought my ancestors, packed them into floating sardine cans and sold them to other Europeans in the New World. In the early 20th century, Germany practices in Southwest Africa the techniques of genocide, later perfected in the Holocaust. Past laws were invented by Germans in Southwest Africa. I was 50 years old before I came to Europe. When I did, I found people there that now compose my dream of Europe. There are Afro-Europeans and other black Europeans, those hyphenated people who, in concert with other people of the African diaspora, are increasing forces for international change. We concentrate difference inside of us in ways that can illuminate the future with a light the world has not yet seen. I'm an outsider dreaming of Europe, but black Europeans are not foreigners to you, not strangers. Yet I do not hear the voice of one black European writer here, and so I wonder how serious this dreaming can be. I believe it is a hyphenated people of Europe who represent a last strength of Europe to learn how to deal with difference creatively, rather than pretending it does not exist or destroying it. Those of us who feel our star in the ascendant do not need to diminish the efforts of others who wish to examine their own decline with grace. I bear no one here ill will. We have learned useful tools from Europe, and by we, I mean that 2/3 of the world population that are people of color. Our survival means learning to us to use difference for something other than destruction, though that does yours. And with or without you, we are moving on. Sorry for...
No, thank you very much for reading the text. Just from this short text, we can obviously see that Audre Lorde had a very different dream of Europe from what we see today. It has been 30 years, right, since she gave this lecture, or this speech. How do you see now the difference, both in maybe Europe and all around the world, concerning this dream? How is it different now than it was when she was fighting for this dream?
Well, unfortunately, I think as everyone who's here knows, I think we're in a period where, you know, like Audre says in the film, it's going to get worse, you know, but that doesn't mean don't fight. You know, it just means it's not going to be easy. I mean, we have a worldwide occurrence of rightist forces gaining strength and getting into governments, whether it's in Germany or in Brazil or US and Netherlands. I mean, it's all around. And we just came back from Brazil, where the film was shown in Belo Horizonte and in Salvador Bahia. And we had contact with many women, with black lesbians too, who are now faced with the Bolsonaro government. And their sense was that we now need to really work on a local level and create more and more community. And I don't know if you heard about the name Marielle Franco. She was shot and killed on March 14 last year. And after, she was a black lesbian activist, mother, and she was in the government, in the city government of Rio de Janeiro. So it meant, somebody who's in the government even can be just shot in the street, And actually, in the last meeting she was in before she was killed, she quoted Audre Lorde at the end of her speech, and they have that on. If you look at on Google, there's a short film on her life where they show that. So after she died, there were groups all over developing activities, and that was very encouraging to see that in Brazil. And I think that's what's needed everywhere now. If we want to withstand this affront of the right and make sure that they can move into governments in a way that has the effect of laws being changed, of laws being installed which definitely are against the poor, the discriminated, the minorities, and will affect the middle class also. Like Audre says, you are not protected by not being a person of color. I mean, the effect, of everything that's around you in terms of rightist politics affects also those who feel they're fairly safe still. So I think that she would probably emphasize, if she was with us now, that we need to create connection, like she said then also, it's connections and between communities, using differences in a creative way rather than, shutting ourselves off from those who are the others and pretending there are no problems, because there are problems, there are differences. We need to name them and we need to work with them. We need to find out how can we find commonalities beyond differences without ignoring them or actually says without destroying them.
Ja, also wir haben eine Zeit gehabt, wo wir, ich fange mal so an, wir haben schon eine ganze Menge geschafft, wir Afrodeutschen oder Schwarzen in Deutschland.
We have achieved quite a bit, we black Germans.
Wie man im Film gesehen hat, wir haben uns erstmal sichtbar gemacht, also wir sind nicht mehr zu übersehen in Deutschland.
We became visible, we can no longer be overlooked in Germany.
Wir haben Einfluss genommen auf Bücher, die Schwarze in einer ganz bestimmten diskriminierenden Weise darstellen, sowohl Schulbücher als auch in anderen Büchern.
We took influence on books which present blacks in a discriminatory way, like school books. And
wir haben versucht, auch in der deutschen Sprache immer wieder zu gucken, wo findet Diskriminierung statt in Form von Sprache.
And also looking at language and influencing the use of language, discriminatory language, like what's called the N-word, which, does that mean something? Here?
Yeah, we know what you mean.
Yeah? Okay. And that's become pretty general now, that people know they are not supposed to use that word.
Ja, insofern hat sich eine Menge verändert. Mittlerweile sind, ich meine, Afrodeutsche ist ja immer noch eine der kleinsten Minderheiten in Deutschland.
So things have changed, and Black Germans are one of the smallest minorities.
Heute findet man natürlich Afrodeutsche auch in allen Berufen, allen Bereichen, sowohl als Professor ist immer noch sehr wenig, aber eben auch in anderen leitenden Positionen, was früher eben nicht der Fall war.
But today you find Black Germans in all kinds of positions as teachers, lawyers, professors, doctors. Professors, very few, you can count them on 2 hands, and that was not the case like 30 years ago.
Heute ist es jetzt so, dass wir natürlich nicht nur für uns alleine kämpfen, sondern mit der Bewegung, dass eben viele Menschen die zu uns geflüchtet sind.
And today we do not fight just for ourselves, but together with many people who had to flee from their countries.
So dass wir mit vielen anderen Minderheitengruppen oder die von Rassismus und Ausgrenzung betroffen sind, mit denen arbeiten wir zusammen.
So that we work together with other groups who are affected by discrimination and exclusion.
Maybe now is the time for the audience. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Just raise your hand, or we can also translate if you want. Anyone? Yeah, sure.
I don't think I need the mic. I hope everyone can hear me. Hello, my name is Jessica. I am from Brazil. It's a real honor to have the opportunity to be here and to hear you speak, so thank you very much for that. Thank you also for organizing the event. It's the second time I see the movie, and it has moved me a lot since the first time. I cried a lot, and today's the same. It's very emotional. I can really connect with it in many levels. So I was actually interested in asking how was the experience in Brazil and what were the reaction of the women there. Yeah, that's mainly my question. And once more, thank you very much.
Well, we said already a little bit about it. The reaction to the film you meant now, it was very, very positive. Like in Belo Horizonte, I think it was an opportunity also for Black lesbians who were with us on the podium to talk to an audience of at least 130, 140 persons about their situation and what they were working on, working with young people and one woman, and I think, you know, there, and in Salvador Bahia, we were at the university, but it was a very mixed audience, and there were all Black women on the podium with us from different community organizations, but also teaching at the university. And yeah, I mean, I did some interviews afterwards with several of them, which eventually I'm going to put on this YouTube list. I mean, they were all very moved, and yeah, and felt that, you know, Audre was speaking very much to their situation. You know, that a lot of the things in the film are still so valid today, even though we might want to see more change, but the film, I think, our experience now has been, wherever we went with it, that people always felt that it gave them a certain energy to do the work, you know, to ask themselves, well, what am I doing with my life in terms of political activity?
Ich kann etwas ganz Kleines noch dazu erzählen.
Yeah. I want to mention something little in addition.
Also am Anfang, ich fand es sehr angenehm, dass man mich als Brasilianerin gesehen hat. Das war zumindest mal ein Gefühl, ach, ich gehöre da irgendwie dazu. So.
I liked it that people saw me before I started talking, of course, saw me as a Brazilian, giving me the feeling I belonged.
Es war ja in meinem Land am Anfang nicht selbstverständlich, dass ich auch Deutsch bin.
That was not self-understood in my country, even when I opened my mouth. to talk that I was German.
Aber als wir in Salvador Bahia waren, war auch eine sehr junge afrodeutsche Frau dort.
When we were in Salvador Bahia, there was a very young Afro-German there who was just doing a practicum at the Goethe-Institut.
Und sie sagte mir gleich zu Anfang, dass sie sich ungern als Deutsche outet.
And she said to me that she does not like outing herself as a German.
Ich konnte es gut nachvollziehen, weil ja ungefähr 80% sind schwarz, in Salvador zumindest.
I could understand that. In Salvador Bahia, about 80% of the population is black.
Und sie hat den Film auch das erste Mal gesehen. Wir haben aber vorher sehr, sehr lange miteinander gesprochen und ich habe ihr erzählt, was für Prozesse ich durchgemacht habe, dass ich heute schon sagen kann, Deutschland ist meine Heimat, es ist meine Kultur, ich bin dort aufgewachsen und so weiter und so fort. Und was es aber auch heute bedeutet, es so sagen zu können.
She saw the film for the first time, but we had long talks before, where we talked about, Ika talked with her about what the process was for her to come to a point where she can say, Germany is my country and this is my culture, and I accept that.
Obwohl ich doppelte Staatsbürger habe, also auch die US-Citizenship.
Even though I have double citizenship with the US.
Okay, und Mani hat den Film dann gesehen und mein Herz ist nur noch so, und sie kam zu mir und sagte nach dem Film, sie bekommt zum ersten Mal ein anderes Gefühl zu ihrem eigenen Land und dass es ganz viel für sie bewegt.
And Mani saw the film for the first time, and this still moves my heart that she said then that she, through the film, she got a different feeling toward her country and anderes Gefühl zu ihrem Land und
zu ihrem Land und ihrem Deutschsein.
And to her being German.
Das heißt nicht, dass sie sofort Salvador Bahia verlässt, sie fühlt sich dort sehr wohl.
Doesn't mean that she's going to leave Salvador Bahia right away, but she feels very, very comfortable there.
I would finish the discussion with one last question from me, maybe a bit more personal than were the ones about activism and feminism and writing. Because in this issue of Kapital, we have published the first translation of a very powerful and moving essay by Audre Lorde called Man-Child. And in this essay, she talks about bringing up her son as a lesbian in a lesbian couple. So I wanted to ask what her opening up as a lesbian in Germany meant for you personally, and also I know that you know her son, so you might maybe enlighten us, like tell us more about his side of the story, like what was his experience in this household, how he perceived it.
What was the first part of your question?
When as you mentioned in the movie, that her coming to Germany and openly talking about being lesbian and being in a lesbian relationship, what did it mean to you personally? Was it different than any other writers before, let's say?
Well, I mean, I always knew that Audre was a lesbian, and when I met her first in 1980 in Copenhagen, you know, we saw that when she said, in the film, when I said that she afterwards thought I was a lesbian CIA agent, yeah, that's usually people laugh at that point, but you did not. And so that was clear, you know, and our publishing house, you know, had published lesbian authors, so there was not really anything special in Germany at that time. There was a movement, and yeah, so she was part of that.
Zu Jonathan? Ja, ich habe Jonathan bin ich oft, aber ich habe ihn kennengelernt.
I got to know Jonathan, Audre's son.
Und es gibt einen anderen Film, der heißt Litany of Survival, wo Jonathan und auch die Tochter selber in dem Film auch sprechen.
There's another film on Audre Lorde called A Litany for Survival, Life and Work of Audre Lorde, which is on her whole life, and Berlin is just a very small part of that. And in that film, Jonathan is talking, and also Elizabeth Audre's daughter.
Ich denke nicht, dass es für beide ein Problem war, dass Audre die Kinder eben mit einer Frau auch mit einer weißen Partnerin aufgezogen hat.
I don't think that it was a problem for both of them to be raised by Audre together with a female partner.
Was mich sehr beeindruckt hat, als Jonathan sagte, dass seine Mutter gesagt hat, ihr könnt verlieren, aber nie ohne zu kämpfen.
What impressed me was when Jonathan says in the film, describes his mother, and says one thing that was very crucial was that she said, you can lose, but you cannot not fight. You know, like you're allowed to lose, but you're not allowed not to fight. You know.
Yeah, I think these are quite powerful words for us at the end. There are more words, yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'll leave the microphone to you, and you can say some last words.
Ja, kannst du vielleicht Macht und Sinnlichkeit und die Karten, die Karten mal holen. Well, I just want to mention a couple of things for your information. One thing is that we created an Audre Lorde archive at the Free University of Berlin, which is quite frequented by different persons, most of them from the US, and who are doing research, who are writing blogs, and like one woman now just transcribed the courses Audre taught. I recorded all of her seminars and all of her interviews and discussions, a lot of them. So all that material is there, and I think that's very crucial for the film also, that I had all this audio material. That way we didn't have a narrator, which would have been a very different film, but you hear Audre talking. And so this is one thing I want to mention. If anybody ever comes to Berlin, that might be something to look at. We also have a Mai Ayim archive, which is on the poet Mai Ayim, who died in '96. And the other thing is that we did another project in 2016, because there were always people coming and saying, well, where did Audre Lorde live in Berlin? Where did she have coffee? And where did she work? And so we did this Audre Lorde in Berlin online journey in German and in English. And it's you can do it on your smartphone or on the computer, better on the computer, bigger image. And there's a website info where you have a content list with description of the individual places, or you can go directly or just click on the map. And so that's where you get audio and photos and videos with Audre Lorde, and people who haven't seen the film can get to know her that way. And there's other material too, which is not in the film on this one. So, and we're always happy to get comments. So there's a place where you can send comments, contact. I don't usually get any, but it would be nice to get some from you. Yeah, so those were the two things I wanted to mention. And there's one book here which we're going to leave in the library, which is in German, Macht und Sinnlichkeit, text by Audre Lorde and Adrienne Rich. Adrienne Rich, the Jewish colleague, writer, famous writer in the US. And so that I put that together a year before Audre came to Berlin, and that has been quite widely read already at that time, also before she came. And it has a lot of nice photos in it. So if you're ever in this library, you can look at that. Yeah. And the other thing is, we didn't have a chance to say thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you to Thomas and to Kapitálu for organizing all of this, and to the Goethe Institute for co-organizing, and to Marek, who exchanged millions of emails with me. So this has been really great event for us, and we're glad that so many came. We didn't know how many would come. We were in Prague before, so there's been a collaboration between you here and the project Display in Prague. So this has been a really nice trip for us. Thank you, everyone.
I can't say anything more beautiful than you did, so let me just thank you for coming, and I hope to see you at some other discussion organized by Kapitálu. And thank you very much again, Dagmar and Ika. Thank you for coming.